No problem.
Hi, welcome, and welcome, Emma. Emma, do you want to just tell us a bit about yourself? Who you are, what you do?
Yeah, so like Andy said, my name's Emma. I live in Bournemouth. I'm 41 years old. I love cats and rugby. Trying to think of all the interesting
rugby,
things.
that's been an achievement.
Cats play rugby. And I have the privilege of working with some amazing Christian organisations and charities, both locally and nationally. And I am setting up, as we speak, a national charity helping churches to work with addiction. And yeah.
Brilliant. And do you want to say a little bit about why addiction is something that just really resonates with you?
Yeah, I mean, working with churches, you see so many people that have passions for different types of outreach or brokenness or, crisis, but mine actually comes from first-hand lived experience of addiction. And both myself and my brother fell into the trap of addiction. And I, at the age of 11, started sort of messing around with food. And I had a lovely upbringing. It wasn't that. My mum's an amazing Christian lady. Admittedly, my dad left when I was tiny, but I just didn't feel I fitted in. And food was one of the things that I sort of withheld, but then overate and sort of meddled with for many years. But then I found alcohol at the age of 13, as many young people do, sadly. But for me, it was like everything was to the extreme. That's where I believe my addictive nature was. And I don't blame anybody or anything. I've never met anybody in addiction that chose to fall down that trap, but I did make some bad life choices. And, in amongst all that chaos, I still was well educated and managed to get to university. But university, again, is a place where drinking was rife and it just was the norm. And I hid my drinking by liking every sport possible. I kind of didn't even realize that I had a drinking problem. I just thought I was a heavy drinker like many of my friends. And, my Christian values, I'll be honest, went out the window at that point. Faith seemed very distant and it was just about having fun and everything. But then, like with any addiction, for somebody that has that addictive nature, you could have two people like drinking or doing the same thing. But for someone with an addictive nature, it's almost like there's a point where it turns its head and it becomes dark. And that happened for me in my latter teenage years after causing a lot of chaos. And it wasn't until in my 20s I realized I was dependent on alcohol. And it was, I wish I could have listened to all the people that were advising me, like saying, please don't drink. But it was not that easy. When you've got an addiction, you become completely powerless over it. Yeah. And before I knew it, I was gripped by addiction. And it wasn't about the substance or the habit. It was about just the fact of addiction. It was like I could have gone to anything to fill that void in me. Yeah. And it got me into some terrible, terrible places.
So how did you come to a place of recovery and wholeness?
Yeah, well, I was 28 years. Yeah, I'm still working on that one.
Oh yeah, I was going to say none of us. I think that's the problem. Is we have this sort of before and after, and actually all of us are works in progress. Really, I think we as Christians need to admit that we're not all sorted, because I think that's part of the danger. I think sometimes is we present this image that looks
and it's a bit like recovery. I never say I'm fully recovered because I believe it's an ongoing journey. I know that Christ has restored me and my faith has rebuilt me, but there's still things to do. And at my worst 13 years ago, I was just a mess. I was drinking about 2 litres of vodka a day and just wanting to give up and die. And I just, if you'd asked me what colours I liked or what food I liked or what I liked doing, I didn't know any of that. I'd lost my identity. And I realized that God was with me all along, because there's many reasons I shouldn't be here today. I'd smashed up my car, drink driving. I ended up on probation. I hurt a lot of people. I had no friends. All the glamour of partying disappeared, and it was just dark. It was horrible, and life just was meaningless. And I was really, really blessed because my mother's a pharmacist, and she had connections with the Pharmaceutical Society, who normally only support children, but they made an exception. I was 28 and they helped get me into a rehab in Wiltshire. And I was just so blessed because it was what they call a 12-step rehab, which originates from Alcoholics Anonymous, these 12 steps, which actually originates with Christian people. And, you know, Alcoholics Anonymous and all the other anonymous fellowships that help people with addiction, you know, it's worldwide and millions of people get help with that. But, you know, it's lovely when I saw these 12 steps. I saw the process you go through in order to help with that healing journey. And in it, it's a God. And for me, that's when my faith started rebuilding, as well as Emma, like physically and emotionally getting better. And that was 13 years ago, and it's been quite a journey since.
And so I'm just moving a little bit because the internet kind of started to look, so it flashed up to say it was unstable. Might have to edit that bit out. The last bit anyway. So.
What was that? That's fine. You take that.
Yeah. I've got someone who's been helping me with my video stuff, and yeah, she's going to watch this.
No, it's fine.
Actually, no, she's pretty good. Yeah. Sorry. So. Yeah. So the last bit you were saying was about the helping in recovery, the 12 steps, and Christ coming in and helping you at that point of play. Yeah, do you want to? Yeah.
Yeah, well, since then, I mean, I'll tell you a bit about the last 13 years, because a lot of people think that people put down the drink or stop the pornography or, you know, stop the drugs or, you know, whatever it may be that's gripping someone, stop the online shopping. There's so much of it at the moment, you know, and then life's rosy. Well, unfortunately, it's not quite that simple, you know. Being in a recovery, it's a bit like when you become a Christian. Sometimes that's when the hard work begins. But my gosh, the final destination you come to, or the journey you're on, is so worth it. Yeah. And that for me has been like my recovery journey. I realized that in recovery, I sort of kept my faith and my recovery quite separately. And that was for many years that was like that. And, you know, but I managed to stay in recovery for a while, but I had a horrible experience for 8.5 years ago, where I drank again. I'd love to also say that you get into recovery and then that's it, you know, but for me it wasn't, and relapse was part of my story. I mean, I haven't touched a drop of alcohol now for 8.5 years, but back then when I did, it was only for a matter of weeks, but my gosh, all the carnage that was almost like they're waiting for me happened. And I remember, you know, sitting in a police cell in Bournemouth, having had, you know, been caught by the police, having drunk drove, and you know, a citizen's arrest happening, and they took my license off me for 5 years at the time, and I just felt so ashamed and guilty, and I could have hurt so many people, you know, in that process. And ultimately, I was hurting myself, and I remember coming back to friends and family and saying, like, I need help, and that was one of the hardest things to do, but probably one of the strongest things anyone can ever do when they're gripped by something, is to say, I need help. And I did that, and people wrapped their arms around me and supported me, and, you know, and I started doing the right thing and giving my all to recovery, not just cherry picking the bits that I wanted people to see. And 6 weeks into that recovery journey, so 8 years ago, it was the 12th of the 12th of the 12th. I had quite it's an amazing date to remember, but I had it was like the worst and best day of my life all rolled into one, where my mum and I had been to Iceland. I'd taken her there to the country, not the shop, by the way. Because I said this story once, and someone said, that's a really cheap amends to make to your mum to take her to a frozen food store. But we'd gone to the country.
Marks and Spencer's, yeah. Waitrose, yeah.
Iceland. So we went to the country, and it was beautiful. And we came back, and my mum was about to head back to Wales, where she was living, and, you know, getting ready. And then literally she fell over in my sort of lounge area, and she hadn't fallen, she'd had a cardiac arrest and her heart had stopped. And literally I was there, I was 6 weeks sober again, and I didn't really know what to do. I just started, like, I was praying. I was like, in the 12-step fellowships we use something called the Serenity Prayer, and I started praying that, and I had the paramedics on the phone. I ran and got my friend, who was also in the block of flats that we were in, and it happened to be her birthday. And normally she'd have been at work, and I don't believe in coincidences, I believe in God incidences, you know, and there was all these little like things happening. But my friend was there, she'd just done her CPR training, she came and helped me, and the two of us did CPR on my mum until the paramedics got there. And literally and I say this because a bit like addiction and recovery, for someone helping someone in recovery, you only need to know a little bit to be able to step in and help. And myself and my friend Kim, we only knew a little bit of first aid training, but it was enough to just act and work. And you know, we did what we could do. The paramedics came, they took over, and in that moment of the most chaos, you know, they're shocking my mum's heart, there's, you know, medicine, and you know, it's just crazy atmosphere. I felt this peaceful, and I've been praying, and I only know that's God, you know, whether you believe it or not, you could visibly see this peace fall in the room, and I pictured someone else there in that room, and I know that Jesus was there with us. And you know, whether you're a believer or not, you know, for me, that was when my faith became so real, because I didn't just believe it, I felt it, I saw it, I knew it.
The whole
And
isn't it? Yeah, the encounter. Everything
came together in that moment, and literally, you know, the paramedics turned, the guy with the paddles, they tried mum's heart about 6 or 7 times, and he turned around to me with these paddles in his hands, and he said, "I'm so sorry," you know, and I knew he was going to say, "We have to stop." There was this look on his face, and I just looked at him, and I just said in this peaceful voice, that in this carnage that was going on, I said, "You know, please, can you try one more time?" And there was this connection between me and this chap, and literally he turned around, tried one more time, and apologies for that, tried one more time, and my mum's heart just started. And it was amazing, and they rushed her down to hospital, and it was just beautiful, and you know, chaos but beautiful, because mum was alive and she was fighting for her life and that, and she was unconscious for a few days, and when she woke up, the first words she said to me was, you know, "Emma, I'm powerless." And I say this because in addiction, you know, you don't need to have complicated words. You just need to know a few little things. And for somebody in addiction, they're completely powerless, just like my mum was with all that happened. It was not her choice, but other people can wrap themselves around people and help them. And, you know, mum's alive to tell the tale. She wrote, I got involved with something called the recovery course after that, which is a national course helping people with addiction. And I became a trustee with them, and I'm now like a partnership director helping network for them and fundraise. But I do that voluntarily, but I literally, the recovery course brings a Christian element into recovery. It's a course, you know, based on the 12 steps, but bring in the Bible, you know, the biblical comparisons. And I got involved with that, and I loved it, and I brought it to Bournemouth. And my mum wrote the recovery support group, which is a national program that runs alongside it. So she knew that she was brought back for a time like that, which is amazing. But, you know, with the recovery course, just as an example, you know, we started it at a church in Bournemouth, gosh, 6.5, 7 years ago. And it was like opening the floodgates. You know, the addiction is so rife, and we don't, because the course is not just for things like alcohol and drugs, it's the whole spectrum of addiction habits and compulsive behaviors. So I even met somebody once, and I'll tell you the story. I went to see this recovery course running in London. That's where it originated from 15 years ago. And basically I was put in this women's group, and we were like going around in the circle, like asking people, you know, what their addiction was. And there was this little old lady, and I thought she must be someone's grandmother, and she wasn't. She was there because she had an issue. And she said, you know, she said, "Emma, I've got this thing, and it's the first thing I do in the morning, the last thing I do at night. I spend all my money on it. My husband, who I've been married to for 50 years, wants to divorce me because of it." And I was like, "What is it?" You know, she didn't look like a crack addict or a heroin addict or a drinker, you know. And she said she was addicted to cross stitch. And I laughed, because cross stitch was something my nan used to do, like knitting. And I was just like, really? And then I looked at this woman and the pain she was in, you know, it reminded me of the pain I was in when I used to drink, you know. And that's the thing, addiction doesn't discriminate. It can hit people at any point, any time, with anything. And once someone admits it, and you know, like when we opened the doors to this recovery course in Bournemouth, that course alone had about 150 people come to that very first course. And over the last 7 years, I've had the privilege of helping to run it in probably about 8 or 9 different churches around Bournemouth and Poole and Christchurch and Ringwood. And I've seen over 1,000 people access the course in our locality alone, and it's just meeting a need, you know, and there's much more out there. I work with the charity Faith Works, and, excuse me, set up an addiction project to basically fill another gap that was there, and already we've got, you know, 50, 60 regular people that we're working with, which is huge, and we're running like walks and recovery days and things like that because the need is there. And I don't know about yourself, Andy, but a lot of my ideas have been born out of frustration, and I'm quite an all-or-nothing. Yeah, and you look back and you think, you know, gosh, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but you know, I've been very frustrated that there's not more happening, and I realise actually it's not that people don't want to help with addictions, people don't know how to, and there's a lot of fear and stigma attached to it. Like anything, like, you know, a lot of things like homelessness or, you know, getting involved with food banks, whatever it may be, but with addiction it's messy, and I've decided to set up a charity to help just journey with and equip churches to understand addiction more. And so that they can actually act. Because a lot of places just set up things, but they don't have the culture or the confidence ready to do it. So it's almost like backtracking and making it fun and enjoyable. So I've literally just set up this charity called STAR, which is Steps to Active Recovery, and that's going sort of, it will be going national in the next year or so. Yeah. And you know, I'll sort of end on this, like with my story, but like 13 years ago, I couldn't be in a room with more than 2 people out of like fear of anxiety, and you know, everything was stripped away from me through addiction, but bit by bit through faith and good people around me, I've been able to rebuild that. And you know, if you'd have told me I'd be doing what I'm doing now when I was, you know, 13 years ago, I'd have said no way, I couldn't do it. You know, and I'd have been scared, and that's why I believe God doesn't reveal everything all at once. You know, it's bit by bit and baby steps. You know, and in September, I'm probably, if it happens, I'm going to the Liverpool Anglican Cathedral because I've been nominated for this award, which is the positive role model for faith, race and religion for the UK. Yeah. And it's like, it's for the National Diversity Awards. There were 60,000 nomination and votes. And I've been whittled down to 6 people in my category out of the whole country. And it's like, I don't need that recognition, but it's like, for me, it just shows from the girl I was that wanted to die and give up, and alcohol was my best friend. Now, being able to help people in this horrible illness that people suffer with, from my own experience, it's just mind-blowing, you know, and I give God all the credit for that. And yeah, it's just lovely talking with you about it today.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing something of your story. Can I just ask before we go, if you're talking to a church leader, a Christian, and they were saying, I just want to be more fruitful in helping people with addiction, what would you say your top couple of tips would be? You know, someone who's got a heart but not much. Yeah, what would you say to?
I think for an actual church, for an infrastructure, I'd get the conversation going. I think getting the conversation going around addiction, inviting people in that have stories, testimony is the most amazing, powerful way to understand it a bit more and make it enjoyable and fun for people watching. And then it would be, you know, identifying some key people that have a heart for it, and actually, you know, realizing that as a church, you don't need to do it all. There are people and organizations like, you know, myself, Faith Works, the charity that we're setting up, that can journey with you. Fear and stigma is the thing that stops people acting. And actually, it's like, you know, people just want to help but don't know how to. For example, I knew a home group in a church who, wonderful, godly people, and they had a lady who was addicted to alcohol in their group, and literally I heard what they did, which was so beautiful, but it could have also killed this woman, in that they actually rallied around and bought her a car because they thought that would help her. This lady couldn't leave her house without drinking neat spirits, you know, so to give someone car keys could have been catastrophic. So it's just about educating people and saying, actually, there are so many other things you can do that are much more gentle, less costly, but could really help someone. And just encouraging people to come up, get open about their issues, because it's not just your typical drugs and alcohol. There's so many, you know, pornography within the church context is
a massive issue. Yeah.
You know, gambling is so on the increase. With the pandemic, we just, you know, we're in and gone through, it's, you know, addiction is rising in all areas, shopping addiction, internet you know, social media. It's gone through the whole spectrum. So it's just about healthy conversations to say, you know, it's okay not to be okay. Most of us, they say that between 90 and 95% of people have a habit or compulsive behavior that if they were free of, they'd be happier. So that's 90 to 95% of our churches too. So we need to address it and address it quick.
Brilliant. Emma, thank you so much. That's been brilliant. Fantastic. Thank you.
No, well done, and thank you for all that you do, Andy, to help so many people, and keep it up.
Bless you. Thank you.